My 21-year-old daughter spent 6 months restoring an antique piano as a 50th wedding anniversary gift for my mother, a gift poured with her heart and pride. This morning, I saw it listed on a second-hand auction site. I didn't call her right away. Instead, I chose another way. 10 days later, she was the one at my door, her voice cracking with rage. That morning, I woke up like any other day, my phone still clutched in my hand on the pillow beside me. I hadn't taken a sip of water yet, hadn't pulled the curtains to let the light in, when the screen lit up with a familiar notification. An item you might like. From the second-hand auction app one sometimes browse for random kitchen finds. I tapped it open, eyes still blurry, my mind hovering somewhere between dream and consciousness. But with just one glance, I was wide awake, as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water straight over my head. There on the screen, among listings for scuffed wooden chairs, peeling oil paintings, and lamps with cracked shades, stood an upright piano. But not just any piano.
MS piano.
I recognized it instantly. No need to read the description. No need to zoom in. On its left leg was a lightning-shaped crack running diagonally down, sharp as a frozen blade. And along its body bloomed deep pink peonies Emma had painted by hand, each petal and stamen brushed with such care that the slightest tremor could have ruined the design. That piano wasn't a decorative prop. It was 6 months of sweat, of late-night varnish mixing with the scent of peppermint tea, of sandpaper whispering over wood in my living room. It was the gift Emma had been preparing for her grandmother's 50th wedding anniversary, the gift she believed would move her to tears. And now there it was.
Cold. Distant.
Photographed hastily with an old phone, the fluorescent light making the peonies look pale, as if drained of all their color. Next to the picture was a single line, upright piano, good condition, starting bid, $300. It felt like someone had reached into my chest, pulled out my daughter's heart, slapped a weekend clearance sticker on it, and tossed it into a marketplace for whoever bid the highest. I sat frozen, my fingers still on the screen, one question looping in my head. What did she do? The night of the anniversary party had all the trappings of something out of a lifestyle magazine, the kind my mother used to flip through, leaving them open to pages she thought resembled her. The rented ballroom glowed under soft golden light, the kind that made champagne look richer and skin look forgiving. Somewhere in the corner, a string quartet played something elegant enough to make small talk feel like a performance. The air was thick with a heady, almost suffocating scent of lilies. Glasses clinked in polite, rhythmic intervals. Laughter rippled in curated bursts. Every detail seemed staged, down to the white linen napkins folded into swans, waiting to be admired more than used. And then the doors at the far end opened. Emma appeared, her small frame almost hidden behind the upright piano she was carefully wheeling in. She was dressed simply, black dress, hair pulled back, but there was a light in her eyes that outshone every chandelier in that room. People turned as she passed, voices lifting in surprise. A few guests gasped, the kind of gasp that lives halfway between admiration and curiosity. Everyone reacted, except my mother. She stayed seated, back perfectly straight, hands resting on her lap, watching Emma like a judge waiting for the defense to finish their statement. Emma stopped just short of the main seating area, locked the piano's wheels, and stepped back as if unveiling something sacred. The peonies she had painted caught the warm light, petals blooming across the wooden body like they belonged there all along. My mother tilted her head, the faintest narrowing of her eyes. Mom. Oh, you repainted it? I've always preferred the natural wood. It wasn't said with malice, at least not the kind you could point to in court. It was said in the tone of someone commenting on the weather, an unmovable truth delivered as fact. Emma smiled, a real, unguarded smile. She didn't hear the dismissal. She only heard the acknowledgement. Emma, I thought this color would bring out the sound. Her voice was steady, but I noticed the way her fingers flexed at her sides, a small habit she had when she'd been practicing scales for hours. 21 years old, a conservatory student with eyes that still believed in the goodness of effort, hands roughened in small, uneven patches from hours pressing against ivory keys. She was the kind of person who thought beauty and meaning could coexist without compromise. I stood there, watching her, and my mind slipped backward to a living room decades ago, lit by the afternoon sun streaming through lace curtains. My mother had once owned a piano like this, a wedding gift from my grandfather.
But to
her, it wasn't an instrument, it was a prop. A piece of decor meant to impress guests, polished weekly, played rarely. Its lid was always closed, like an invitation that had been revoked before anyone could RSVP. I remember the one time I asked if I could practice on it. She told me, without looking up from her magazine, that's not what it's for. And yet here was Emma, offering her a piano not as furniture, not as ornament, but as a vessel for music, for life. I should have known that would be the problem. Back in the present, the auction listing still glared at me from my phone screen, every pixel a small, deliberate insult. My thumb hovered above the glass, unsure whether to scroll away or zoom in, like either choice would make it hurt less. The room around me felt too still, too loud with the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock. My chest was tight, the kind of tightness you feel before a storm hits, when the air presses in on all sides. I didn't want to call her. God, I didn't. But the thought of not knowing, of letting the truth sit there like an unopened letter, felt worse. I hit dial. It rang twice. Then her voice, sharp and unsoftened by anything resembling affection, filled the line. No greeting, no "how are you?" Just the bare fact of her presence. Me. Where's the piano Emma gave you? The silence that followed was short enough to pretend it was nothing, but long enough for me to hear the subtle shift in her breathing. She had heard the weight in my voice. She just didn't care. Mom, light, almost breezy. Oh, I sold it. Someone offered a good price. I thought Emma would be happy knowing it's being used regularly. She said it like she was telling me the weather forecast. Sunny with a chance of rain. Sold the piano. Passed the salt. That kind of lightness is only possible when the thing you're talking about means nothing to you. The words slid into my ear like ice water, and my hand clenched around the phone until my knuckles ached. My fingers had gone slick, sweat beading in my palm. The device wobbled, threatening to slip, and for a split second I saw it in my mind, falling from my hand, hitting the floor, shattering, the way Emma's trust had just shattered in mine. From her end of the line, I could hear faint background noise, the muffled clink of cutlery, a low hum of voices, the hiss of an espresso machine. She was at a cafe. Brunch, probably. Chatting with friends, maybe laughing between bites. And there it was, the sharp, bitter truth. Not just that she'd sold the piano, not just that she'd stripped Emma's work of its meaning, but that it lived in her mind as something so small, so inconsequential, she could talk about it over poached eggs and coffee. I swallowed hard, but the taste in my mouth was metallic. I wish I could say this was the first time my mother had done something like this, that selling Emma's piano was a single, isolated lapse in judgment. But it wasn't. It was just another loop in a pattern so worn in, I could trace it with my eyes closed. My mother had a way of measuring worth that was less about effort, more about resonance. Not the kind you feel in your chest when a note rings true, but the kind that exists only in her head, where some people's voices counted and others didn't. And for as long as I can remember, mine didn't.
Linda's did.
Linda, my younger sister by 5 years, was the baby of the family, the miracle child after my parents thought they were done having kids. She was dimples and ribbons and glittery sneakers, the kind of kid who never had to earn affection because it came prepackaged. My mother's eyes lit up for her in a way I didn't even know was possible. For me, the lighting was always dim. I still remember being 15, standing on the stage of a dusty municipal auditorium, clutching a certificate that said I'd won first place in the provincial piano competition. My palms had been damp all through my performance, my knees shaky, but when they called my name, something bloomed in my chest. I thought, this will make her proud. I came home that afternoon, the sun warm on my back, the air still buzzing with the applause I'd carried with me. I placed the certificate on the kitchen counter, right where she'd see it. She barely glanced at it. "Mom, that's nice, but Linda's playing in the school recital next week. We should plan something special for her." And we did. Linda's special was a backyard party with balloons, cake, and a rented keyboard she plinked through Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on. Every missed note was met with laughter and applause, as though her clumsy little melody was the soundtrack to some divine event. That night, I lay in bed, the sound of the party still drifting in from downstairs. And I realized something I wish I hadn't. I could play the most perfect piece in the world, and it would never be loud enough for her. Linda, though, she was the high note my mother always cranked the volume on.
Me?
I was the rest note, the long, drawn-out silence between someone else's applause. And no matter how hard I tried, she never seemed to hear me. By the time I hung up the phone, my pulse was a steady hammer in my ears. The listing was still open on my screen, the little countdown timer in the corner reminding me exactly how long I had before someone else's hands would be on Emma's piano. I didn't think. I just grabbed my keys. The drive to the second-hand shop felt longer than it should have been. Every red light a personal insult. I kept imagining the piano there, standing under harsh fluorescent lights, surrounded by sagging couches and chipped-in tables, waiting for someone who didn't know its story to claim it. When I pulled into the cracked asphalt lot, the building looked like it had been a hardware store in a former life. Wide front windows streaked with dust, the smell of old varnish drifting out every time the door opened. I walked in, schooling my expression into something casual, like I was here to browse for a desk or a lamp, not to rescue a piece of my daughter's heart. It didn't take long to find it. In the far corner, half shadowed by a leaning bookshelf, the piano stood quiet. The peonies Emma had painted looked almost shy under the cold white lighting, their warmth dulled to a muted blush. I crossed the room slowly, running my fingers lightly along the edge. A thin layer of dust had already begun to settle, careless, like it had been here for weeks instead of days. I pressed one key. The sound that came back wasn't music, it was a breath. A long, tired exhale from an instrument that had been asked to wait too long. The shop owner, a man with silver hair and a sweatshirt that said, "World's okayest boss," ambled over. "Owner, nice piece, huh?
Came in a few days ago.
We've had a couple folks interested. Bidding starts at 300, but..." He let the sentence trail, like a fisherman testing the line. Me lightly, "I'm interested. How much to end the bidding now?" His eyes narrowed slightly, the way people's do when they realize the thing they're holding is worth more to someone else. "Owner, depends how bad you want it." I gave him a number. Twice the starting bid. He didn't even try to hide the way his eyebrows shot up. The handshake was quick. The paperwork quicker. Within minutes, it was mine again, legally, physically, but more importantly, out of reach from anyone who'd see it as just wood and strings. I didn't tell Emma. Not yet. As I wheeled it out to the truck, the afternoon sun hit the painted flowers, and for a moment, they looked alive again, bold and certain, as if they knew where they belonged. I drove home with one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on the cool edge of the piano's frame. Like maybe if I held it close enough, it could forget the days it had been left behind. I waited until the house was quiet before moving the piano into Emma's studio. The wheels groaned softly over the hardwood, the sound like a reluctant confession. I placed it dead center in the room, where the afternoon light spilled in through the tall windows. Emma walked in a few minutes later, stopping in the doorway. Her eyes darted to the piano, then to me. She didn't smile. "Emma, tell me the truth. Grandma sold it just for the money." I held her gaze, the weight of the moment pressing against my ribs. Me. Not just for the money. She didn't see its value. The same way she's never seen mine. The words hung there between us, heavier than I meant them to be. For a moment, neither of us moved. Emma's fingers twitched slightly at her sides, the same way they did before she played a difficult piece, like she was finding her place on invisible keys. She walked past me, tracing the painted peonies with her fingertips. I could almost see the memories flickering behind her eyes, each brushstroke, each night spent sanding the wood until her hands ached. Then she turned, a quiet resolve settling over her features. "Emma, we're not putting it back the way it was. We're going to show them." And she laid out her plan, a performance piece. She would play a recital on the piano, not in some pristine concert hall, but in a space where truth could breathe. Behind her, a screen would loop the footage of her restoration, the sanding, the painting, the tuning, ending with a short clip from the thrift store's security camera, Grandma's hand signing the sales slip, pen scratching over paper like a final, careless note. The way Emma said it, I knew it wasn't just about music anymore. It was about making sure the story couldn't be ignored. Not by our family, not by anyone. The night of the performance didn't feel like a concert. It felt like a trial, one where the truth was the only evidence, and every note would be a witness. The venue Emma chose was nothing like the polished concert halls she'd trained in. It was an old warehouse downtown, the kind that still smelled faintly of oil and rain on rusted metal. Bare bulbs hung from the ceiling like watchful eyes, and the air was cool enough that people kept their coats on. In the center of the room sat the piano. Our piano. The painted peonies seemed almost defiant under the dim light, their petals bold against the black backdrop. By 7 o'clock, the folding chairs were full. Artists, friends, strangers, and yes, a handful of family. I spotted my mother in the back row. Scarf draped perfectly, lips pressed into a neutral line. Linda sat beside her, scrolling her phone. Emma entered without ceremony. No formal dress, no sheet music. She sat, adjusted the bench, and let her fingers rest lightly on the keys. The first chord rang out, deep and resonant, filling the space with something more than sound. Behind her, the screen flickered to life. At first it was gentle, clips of sanding, painting, tuning. Emma's hands in close-up, moving with patient precision. The audience leaned forward, mesmerized. Then the tone shifted. The footage slowed, a security camera angle. A familiar hand sliding a sales slip across the counter. My mother's hand. The pen scratched against paper, captured in perfect clarity. A date stamp in the corner marked it as just days after the anniversary party. The room went still. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Emma kept playing. Her music swelled, not angry but certain, the kind of certainty that comes from deciding you won't be erased. Each note was a statement, each crescendo a refusal. I didn't look at my mother. I didn't have to. I could feel the way she stiffened, the air tightening around her. Somewhere to my left, someone whispered, "Is that?" But no one finished the sentence. When the last note faded, Emma stood.
She didn't bow.
She didn't speak. She simply stepped away from the piano, leaving the final frame frozen on the screen, her grandmother's signature, under the words "Bill of Sale." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly at first, the applause began. It grew, wave after wave, until the room was a storm. And I stood there, knowing we had just told the story in a way no one could unhear. 2 days after the performance, the sky was the color of cold steel. I had just poured myself a cup of tea when a pounding rattled the front door. Urgent, relentless, like someone trying to break through the wood with their bare hands. I opened it. My mother and Linda stood there. My mother was immaculate as always. Beige coat, scarf folded just so. But her eyes were sharp, glinting like the edge of a knife. Linda stood slightly off to the side, arms crossed, her lips twisted into something halfway between annoyance and disdain. "Mom, you need to take that video down. Immediately. And you're going to issue a public apology." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from rage. I leaned against the doorframe, still holding my tea. "Me? No. I won't take it down. And I won't apologize." "Mom, you're humiliating me." I met her gaze without flinching. "Me? No. You did that yourself." I just turned on the light, so everyone could see. The air thickened. Linda rolled her eyes but stayed silent. My mother's grip tightened around the strap of her handbag until her knuckles turned white. I set my cup down on the small table just behind me, speaking slowly, clearly, each word like a deliberate cut. "Me. And one more thing, from now on, I won't be covering any of your debts. You're on your own." It landed like a final seal. My mother's mouth opened, maybe to argue, maybe to plead, but I had already stepped back, my hand closing firmly around the door. When it shut, the sound was soft but heavy, like a verdict being delivered. The pounding resumed for a few seconds, frantic, then slowed, then stopped altogether. Only silence remained, the kind of silence I had spent years trying to find. A month after the performance, the email arrived. Emma stood in front of her laptop, eyes widening as if she'd just seen a new piece of music she'd been waiting for her whole life. An invitation from the International Music Festival in Vienna, one of those stages every conservatory student dreams of. They wanted her to perform her own composition, on that very same piano. The piano was different now. The lightning-shaped crack was still there, the peony blossoms still curling across the wood, but under Emma's hands, it seemed to wear a new kind of light. Whenever I looked at it, I no longer saw a relic of betrayal. I saw a victory, etched in every brushstroke, every retightened string. A rare instrument collector reached out, offering a sum so high I had to take a slow breath to believe it. But Emma only smiled and shook her head. "Emma, it's not for sale. But if they want to display it, that's fine. Just a loan." We signed a simple agreement. The piano would travel with Emma to Vienna, then be placed in the Collector's Museum with a small plaque that read, "Restored by Emma C. 2025. As for my mother, the rumors about the performance and the video spread farther than she'd expected. Within weeks, her name disappeared from the local arts council roster. No announcement, no farewell ceremony. Just a blank space where it used to be. Linda stayed silent. No more snide texts, no more showy photos. Her social media went as still as a locked room. One evening, I stood by the window, watching the city lights spill over the piano in the corner. In that moment, I realized justice doesn't always need a gavel. Sometimes, it rings out in notes no one can silence. 3 years passed. On an autumn morning, sunlight streamed through the large studio windows, spilling in warm golden stripes across the wooden floor. The piano notes rose and fell steadily, not from Emma's hands, but from a small group of young students, their fingers still clumsy, but full of eagerness. Emma sat at the teacher's bench, her hair neatly tied back, her eyes brighter and steadier than ever. That piano still stood in the corner, like a silent witness. The lightning-shaped crack and the hand-painted peonies had faded slightly with time, but the light from the window made them seem as if they were breathing. I sat in the back row, quietly watching. Each time a student hit a wrong note, Emma smiled and gently guided them back. The way she taught patient, grounded reminded me of myself, but of a version that had escaped the shadows of comparison and dismissal. To outsiders, it might just be an old instrument, but to Emma and me, it was far more. It was proof that we had lived through a long winter and still kept our own sound. Now, I thought, it's no longer just an instrument. It's a reminder that sometimes, to keep your own sound, you have to be willing to silence someone else's. Outside, the wind stirred the chimes hanging on the porch. Inside, the music went on like a story that never truly ended, only moved into a new chapter. If this story touched you, leave a comment and tell me what you think. A like, a subscribe, they're more than just clicks. They're the strength that keeps me telling real stories, the kind you might have lived yourself. Let's build a place where our voices will never be silenced.